I didn't plan on making this video, but I had a few people ask me on Instagram, give you a general idea of what I think about different watch brands, both from a technical perspective as well as a marketing perspective, what I think is kind of BS, I guess, in the industry. Now, I do have the benefit of having most of the brands here in this box. If I haven't already had them here before, I buy my watches to review them because I think you have to live with the watch for a certain period of time to truly understand what it feels like to own both that brand and that watch. And so I tend to do that from a collecting perspective is I'll buy a watch, I'll wear it for a while, and then I'll sell it on if it doesn't work for me. So to start the brands, we're gonna start over here, and that is with Breitling. Now, Breitling, I've had experience with two different watches. Their B09, their mint version of their pistachio, whatever you wanna call it. That model is gorgeous. And I think that's an example of where Breitling is doing fantastic things these days, but I think the brand has a lot to come. You know, they've got a good history behind them. Rumored that they came up with this 2-button chronograph layout instead of a mono pusher that used to be around. They have obviously the Navitimer, they have the Premiers, they have a lot of different old model lines. But where Breitling, I think, falls apart is in their retail pricing. From my standpoint, I think they're priced just too darn high. If you look at the brand new Navitimers, they retail for like 9 grand, 8, 9 grand. This watch right here is the Navitimer as well. And I can buy this pre-owned for about $3,000 on eBay. This watch here, I'm actually planning to sell right now. So if you're interested, I should have a link to my shop below. I'm not a watch dealer, but I sell things there because I have to cycle through them. But it sometimes feels like you're swimming in too many options sometimes with Breitling. Still love the watch. It's a fantastic watch. It's just for Breitling these days, what they need to do is differentiate themselves. Zenith. Now, I don't have a Zenith here right now. I've had experience with multiple of their watches. Their Chronomaster Sport obviously is one of their most popular watches because it takes a lot of what was popular about the Daytona and puts it in a different package that has Zenith's spin on it. I think what Zenith has been doing is really great from a modern context. They're certainly very well planted in the aesthetic of, I think, a modern watch rather than a vintage inspired watch. Now, they do have models obviously within their El Primero that are vintage inspired, but their modern watches, I think, are where their creativity really shines. They have a lot of different models that are unlike one another versus someone like Rolex or Omega, where the differentiation from one model line to the next is pretty slim and small. Zenith is a much wider gambit of different aesthetically looking watches. Like their Shadow Revival that has the Zenith El Primero movement in it looks very different than the Chronomaster Sport, than their vintage inspired. So their baseline of the El Primero movement, I feel like, is a large reason why people like Zenith in the first place, that history around that movement. But they package it in different ways that I think appeals to a broader audience. You know, I see a lot of marketing from a lot of these different brands, but Zenith I feel like is very like, if you know about Zenith, especially like their Shadow Master Revival. Their Chronomaster Sport's the only breakout pop culture, mainstream focus watch that people have talked about a lot, and only because you can't buy a Daytona. Whereas their other lines, especially even their vintage inspired lines, I think more show what the brand can be rather than just a cash cow to try and get some money. And I think that's gonna allow them hopefully to grow over time. They just need to put money into marketing to make us understand why someone would buy a Zenith over an Omega or a Grand Seiko or a Rolex, who are really putting a lot of money, or Tudor for that matter, putting a lot of money into marketing right now to where you really know that they're there. So Grand Seiko. Grand Seiko's winter edition is part of my collection. They've got a lot of nice features. They have a lot of marketing that I think has been pushed for a good reason. Their Zaratsu polishing is really nice in the fact that it's different. I think it's unique. That being said, the word Zaratsu is used way too much, and it doesn't mean I need to buy this watch because it has Zaratsu polishing. Their spring drive is the same concept. I really like the innovation. People talk about it maybe a little bit too much. Their textured dials are really beautiful. Their attention to detail in their indices are gorgeous. It really, I put this under a microscope and I was surprised by the level of attention to detail in these indices. It's a beautiful watch, beautiful watch. It's one of those watches you keep looking at and you keep looking deeper into the dial. You keep noticing things you didn't notice before. Even their use of a power reserve functionally is great. Their lug holes, that they include lug holes in the side of the case, functionally is fantastic. You know, it is kind of in the blend between a sports watch and a dress watch for most of their models. Their bracelets do kind of suck. There aren't, obviously there are some things that I don't like. I hate the fact that they put Grand Seiko, this big freaking lion, right over the top of the movement. So I can't see the movement very well. Like it obstructs the whole view. I hate that, right? Like there are certain things that they decide in their watches that really don't make any sense to me. And a lot of their sports watches are way too big, like 44 millimeters and on. But when they get something right, I think they get it really right. And I think they're getting popular for good reason. And that is obviously part of it. That being said, if I were Grand Seiko, if you were taking my advice, lose the darn thing on the case back here so that people can actually see the movement. Change things to 20 millimeter lug widths, please. And make your bracelets, with more links so you don't have this bracelet that looks almost like the old Omega Seamaster or old Speedmaster bracelet. It just looks outdated. It's pin and collar system versus screws. It doesn't need to be pin and collars for titanium. The Pelagos figured it out. You can figure it out. It should have an adjustment in the clasp, not just this typical deployant to where I can't do any micro adjustments. Like there are things I think for $6,300 for this watch that I would definitely change to make it, I think, a better package that more people will be willing to buy, because I feared away from buying Grand Seiko for a long time for those reasons. Once I've had it, I've really enjoyed it. But there are a lot of things, especially starting with the bracelet, but even just little details like that, hiding the movement, that I think are very easy to change and very easy to fix that I wish that they did. That being said, they're marketing great, and I think that they're going to continue to increase both in price and in popularity. Sinn. Sinn is a brand that I have loved for a long time. My first watch over $1,000 was the Sinn 104. I bought it direct from Watch Buys. The problem I think Sinn has, they've got a great catalog. Their 903 is like an enhanced version of the Navitimer. Like it's a better, more water-resistant version of the Navitimer. It doesn't say Breitling on the dial, but it says Sinn, so it's just as good. And you can see the history behind that because they own the rights to that design. Point being that you just don't hear about them as much because I think their distribution is limited with just Watch Buys or secondhand market, and the fact that their website is not great. Their marketing is not great. It feels like an engineer built the company, which is great. They've got a lot of cool features, but if Rolex was doing their version of engineering, they'd be naming everything. Like Rollosaur that they have, or their special gold, or their special indices, or their Paraflex shock absorber. They name things just to name them. They're like Apple. They just name something and then it becomes a Rolex version of it. Their silicone hairspring, I think they call Cirlax or something like that. Cirlax, something like that. It's just a silicone hairspring, but they call it something else. And so it sounds fancy. It sounds Rolex specific. They need to brand a little bit better. Sinn has all that technology, if not better, than most of the other watch brands. They just don't push it. They're an engineering firm, really, that makes great watches and then sells them because people see that they're great value. They need to be more of a marketing company, in my opinion, and then people would see how great the watches are. So Sinn is great catalog, but man, they got to step up their presentation, I think, for a lot of different models. Tudor is a company that I have covered a lot. This is the Black Bay 41, the one that just got released, the monochrome that people were calling a Submariner. I did a review on it already. It's obviously not a Submariner. It's just a Black Bay, just in black and white. It's still functional, still very wearable, still beautiful. That being said, the immediate comparison was to the Submariner, right? Because that's just what people do when it's Tudor. And I think because of that, it's one, helping the brand, because they say, well, it's all of Rolex's stuff, but in a cheaper package or more affordable package. At the same time, it's not Rolex. So I think a lot of people will own a Tudor and then switch to a Rolex for a lot. I think at the same time, Tudor has a lot of design inspiration in their own right. Their Pelagos line is fantastic, but they focus so much on the Black Bay line that their catalog is relatively limited. They've got a lot of cash cows in that Black Bay line, but at this point, I think they've kind of oversaturated it. And if they continue to pump out models, they're gonna look like Omega's Seamaster or Speedmaster line, where there's too many options to the point where you can't really decide. Tudor's a great company. They do a great job marketing. They obviously have designs that are very classically inspired because they're Rolex designs or old Tudor designs, which were Rolex designs. They've got a lot of things that people like, and they are a great price point, I think, for what they're offering, especially on the pre-owned market. Like pre-owned Tudor is fantastic for most first luxury watch buyers. I think long-term, they gotta have more inspiration in their own model lines. They gotta focus on the Pelagos, they gotta do different things that are slightly out of the mold. You know, still very boring, still very classic, things that I would like. I like boring watches, but things that are a little bit different. You know, not just like, oh, hey, it's black dial, black bezel now. Now, if they follow the Rolex pattern, they'll just do that and they'll still be popular. But I would love to see them venture a little bit further out, like a Pelagos GMT, frankly. A titanium version of a GMT within that model line would sell like crazy. They could do colorful versions of their chronographs like they used to with their Monte Carlo. They have, I think, the option or the opportunity to do things more like Zenith. They're playing a little safe right now, which makes sense. They're growing, but I'd like to see different things. I'd like to see them expand the catalog. So that's my thoughts on Tudor. I've always loved Tudor. I love their Pelagos line. I had the 39, I've had the 42. I've had every freaking Black Bay dive watch they've ever made in this room to review, but I'd like to see something different, and I'd love to review that. Seiko. Now, Seiko has, I think, had a lot of flack recently for pushing upstream in their market for their pricing. Like this watch here, the Turtle, nowadays with these specs would be like $1,000 watch because it's got a ceramic bezel insert, sapphire crystal, and it says Seiko on the dial. You know, that I don't think is worth the price. When you're going against someone like Sinn or Longines or even Tag Heuer in certain models, like you have to bring a better value, I think, than what Seiko does. Their range on accuracy for their movements is way too big for $1,000 or $2,000 watch. That's, again, just one of the things I think Seiko needs to focus on. What they were really good at was a great value option for people who are willing to tinker or buy 6 in different colorways, different Samurais, different Turtles, different SKXs. And now I feel like their MSRP is the price they really try to sell it at, as opposed to letting gray sellers sell it for something that people are more willing to pay. Like this Turtle I bought for 300 bucks. I would pay $300 for that watch any day of the week. Their GMT originally retailed for 500, I think, 495-ish. Now you can buy it on Amazon for like 350, 330. That makes sense. That's Seiko to me. But when they sell, like I just reviewed their Alpinist GMT for $1,100, my mind immediately goes to all the other $1,100 watches I could buy that I would prefer. And I think that for that reason, Seiko, it's done. Like they're not gonna push back downstream in terms of pricing, but if they do let other sellers sell their watch at more of a reasonable price, I think they'd actually push more volume. Cartier. Now I'm wearing a Cartier right now. This is actually an old model. They don't make this anymore, but they make one like this. They just reintroduced the Cartier Tank Americain in stainless steel. What Cartier is doing great is they're taking their design layout of these different shapes and they're allowing people to buy them at a better price point. Their Tank Must and all the different Tank Must lines with different colorful dials. Their Santos de Cartier, I think, is a great price point for what it's offering. Their Tank Americain now, I think, again, is a great price point for what it's offering. You know, is it a little overpriced still? For sure, because they're almost all quartz models, those affordable versions that I was just talking about, including this. This is now a quartz model, you know, at $6,300, which is a lot, I think, for a quartz watch. Regardless of if it's temperature compensated or not, that's very expensive. You're paying for the brand name. But what I've always loved about Cartier is the aesthetic, the feeling you get when you wear it. You feel like you're from a bygone era, or you're transported back to that era. And that's what this has done for me. And I think that's what they're really good at. You know, they're a name brand that really makes cool looking different designs. And because of that, they stand out. And because of that, people pay the price. You know, you're willing to pay extra because it's a Cartier, because it's got that different look to it. And I don't blame people for it. I don't think it's the best value in the world at all, but I love the models they're making and the models they're introducing. I love the look of them. You have to decide how much you're willing to pay for them. Tag Heuer. Now, Tag Heuer is, I think, going the right path with some caveats. Now, their most recent Kith collaboration was wildly overpriced. I didn't even make a video on it because I thought it was insane. I get it was steel and not just but it's crazy. That's way too expensive, I think, for just a watch like that. But if you're playing it to more, I guess, affluent people and they're willing to pay that price, then they're willing to pay that price. You know, who am I to say what they are or aren't willing to pay? Now, this is their Carrera glass box design in their Skipper model. Now the Skipper you've probably already seen from when Hodinkee released it. This is a vertical clutch column wheel actuated chronograph. I'm gonna do a full review on this here in the next couple weeks. This is a freaking cool watch. Now it's $6,300, it's asking a decent amount of money, but when you compare that even to Tudor, especially from a pre-owned standpoint, because Tag doesn't have the same cachet as just Heuer does, Tag Heuer, now that that's on the dial, doesn't have that same level. Still, you've got a date, you've got a bi-compacts layout, you've got a colorful look in their normal glass box, the black and white. The reverse panda, I think, is very appealing. I've seen that on multiple people's wrists over the last few weeks. I think they've got now, honestly, with this watch, a great value. Something that people would say, yeah, I would buy a Tag Heuer for that. So I feel like Tag Heuer is going down the right path for the most part, and then they have some strange moments where they see an opportunity to make a lot of money. That's kind of what you expect from a corporate entity, though. That's what they're going to do. Part of Swatch Group is model lines, model lines, model lines. So their vintage-inspired Octavias and different models I really liked. This one, in their modern interpretation at 100-meter water-resistant vertical clutch column wheel actuated chronograph, is a fantastic value and a great watch. Beautiful looking watch, something that I think I should see or hopefully see more of out of Tag. So I feel like they're going down the right path. That leads us to Rolex. Now, Rolex, I have multiple, and I'll admit, I'm not necessarily a fanboy. I like classic, iconic looks, and I love the feeling of a 40mm case on my wrist. I like the legibility. I like a lot of things that make Rolex, Rolex. You know, this is their Submariner, their modern Submariner. I actually saw an Instagram video, I'm gonna steal, you'll see the person who originally posted this, of someone flipping through multiple different model lines from the 50s of the Submariner all the way up to now. And they've beefed it up over the years, but it's still the same look. And I think that that is why people love them. Like if you find a layout that works for you, you know, this is the GMT Master 2, a Coke bezel, and this is the Submariner. Both of these are basically the same size. This is, I guess, what, like 20 years old? And this watch here is brand new. I bought this a few months ago. They look very, very, very similar. And I think that consistency in their design layout and the fact that once someone finds one they like, I like the layout of this, I like how it feels on my wrist, I love the GMT Master, that then buying a different version for a different purpose is kind of like a no-brainer, you know? It's like finding a shirt you really like and they offer it in a different color and you go, well, I like that color too, because I love the shirt. Now, their marketing is obviously what's pushed them into the stratosphere. That's why everyone knows about Rolex, is because of their marketing. But what they've done well are consistent iterations on a classic design. They've marketed it originally well, and they've made continuous improvements in the shape, the wearability. You know, this glide lock clasp that's in here was class leading when it first came out. A lot of the things you find in these movements, again, they think ahead and try to innovate and make new things. They don't just rest on their laurels. And so when you add all those things, plus the vertical integration and the decades of history and marketing, it's really hard to not see this look and say that is a dive watch. You know, when you think I want to own one dive watch and I have unlimited money, your mind immediately goes, I think, to the Submariner. Now the downside with Rolex is 1, the waiting list, 2, the price, they're very expensive, and sometimes, definitely, if you're looking at just specs, overpriced for sure. And 3, the type of people that buy a Rolex. You know, if you're someone that says, I want to be different than everyone else, then don't buy a Rolex, because if someone's gonna buy a luxury watch, the first place they're probably gonna look a lot of times is the crown. So if you're not looking for, you know, to feel like you're maybe like everyone else, then don't buy this. And I think that's why a lot of people stray away from it. I think it's popular to hate Rolex. But for example, this right here, this Explorer right here, for some reason people don't hate that, but people do hate someone wearing a Submariner because they just assume, it's like someone saying I had bad experience with Tom and therefore I never want to name my kid Thomas, right? Because then you'd be called Tom and I think of that Tom. Just because of a couple people that wear a Submariner that you don't necessarily like doesn't mean when you wear this every month. Because when I bought this, I assumed I would sell it in a few months because I wouldn't like the feeling, I wouldn't like that other people thought I had a Submariner or anything like that. Most people don't notice what you're wearing on your wrist. And this is a very easy pick up, wear it every day, still look nice, still love the layout, love the glide lock. I adjust it all the time. I like it way more than I expected to. And I reach for it in the watch box way more than I expected to. So that, I think, is why Rolex is Rolex, you know? They've done a lot of things right. And if you're willing to drop both the waitlist issue, hopefully you've got a good AD, the price issue, you know, because these things are expensive, they're emotional decisions regardless. You're not buying something just for specs. If you are, then don't buy any of these. And you're willing to try it and wear it for a little while, you might find that you really like it. At least I have. The last brand is Omega. Now, Omega, I feel like, is an example of a company that does a lot of things right, just like Rolex, but they're owned by a corporate entity. I think of them the same way I think about Rolex. They've got a deeper history. They've got a better model line in a lot of different circumstances. Their Speedmaster, I feel like, is an icon of the entire watch industry, along with the Submariner, but they're structured differently. Because Rolex is independent, they're not a publicly traded company, they operate entirely private and they can do whatever they want, they operate very differently than how Swatch operates with Omega. So if you look at a model line like the Speedmaster, the different variants of Speedmaster, all the different models of just this watch, I think outnumber all of the model lines of all of Rolex. I don't know if that's true, someone can correct me in the comments, but it's generally true. There are way too many model lines. You end up with this paralyzation because where do you go? Like, what do you pick? You only get to pick one because you're not gonna spend like $100,000 on 20 different Omegas. You're gonna buy one. And so because of that, it's really hard. There's too many options, I think, for people to make one choice. The Speedmaster might be an exception to that because you either want the Moon watch or you don't. But now they even have the white dial variant. So you have the Hesalite, the Sapphire, and the white dial variant that are all around the same price point. So when you end up with too many options, I think it's hard to make one option. Whereas if you want a Submariner, you want it with a date or you want it without a date? You go, okay, you want it with a date, great. Next choice, you want a black bezel or you want a green bezel? Black, okay, that's your watch. You know, if you want a Speedmaster, you could say, well, do you want black or white dial? Do you want this layout or do you want a bicompax version of the exact same watch? Do you want it in ceramic or do you want it in steel? Same thing for the Seamaster. And it doesn't take anything away from Omega. They're still a well-made watch, great company. You know, it's a mass-produced watch for sure. And I think all watch enthusiasts respect Omega. That being said, I think a lot is lost because of an oversaturation of all the different options. It feels as though someone walked into a room and said, what are we doing this year? Well, let's do a different dial variant. Okay, and then they do it. Now Rolex, when they do different variants, at least eliminates the prior variant so that their model lines are focused, cohesive, and make sense. Omega doesn't. They'll just keep adding models. I know that they do discontinue things sometimes, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like there's no end to the different ways that they could sell the Speedmaster. And that's kind of what you expect when you're a corporate entity and you're really trying to increase those profit lines and shareholder value and all that stuff. You end up making decisions that aren't the best 10 years from now, but are the best in the next year or 2 years. And so you introduce that new dial variant because it'll get a pop and you'll get that extra money. And then you'll introduce a new dial variant and it'll get a pop because the hype will be surrounding it. So Omega's a great watch company, just a little muddled in the number of models that they have. So those are my thoughts on watch companies, a lot of the different luxury watch brands. What do you guys think? Do you disagree with me? Do you agree? Do you see anything I got wrong or that you would correct or change? Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.